from the Sherpa Chalet at the top of beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's a special episode of Too Many Podcasts. I'm Jim the Podcast Sherpa, and today it's a special episode where I get to speak with people from the entertainment industry. So get yourself an aisle seat, pop up some popcorn, and get a cold drink ready, and sit back. Don't crunch too loud, or else you'll miss the interview from the Sherpa Screening Room. Hey Rebels, welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room, a presentation of Too Many Podcasts. You know me, Jim the Podcast Sherpa. Just want to let you know that today's podcast is being brought to you by Audible, and you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Let's talk a little bit about my guest today. So if I told you he's fought Ken Norton, he's fought George Foreman, and you'd probably say, oh yeah, did he fight Superman too? Yeah, he did fight Superman in the first Superman movie as the villain Non. His name is Jack O'Halloran, and we had a nice little chat about his life and his book and other things going on in his career. Let's take a listen. Hey Rebels, you know, when I do this show, the Sherpa Screening Room, I get to talk to people who are part of the movie business or the television business and always have interesting stories. And my guest today has a history in the movies, but his life story, I think, makes for an interesting movie in itself. Well, he's had a book out for a little while, and it's called Family Legacy, and he's been a professional fighter and an actor as well. So say hello to Mr. Jack O'Halloran. Hey, Jack, how's it going?
Going well. Yourself?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So
Good.
Congratulations on the book, by the way.
Thank you.
And you're calling this a fictional memoir.
Well, they wouldn't let me do it nonfiction. They wouldn't. The government told me they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't let me publish it. So we added some fiction, and it satisfied everybody's soul. So, but it's about probably 80% pure knowledge.
Now we should kind of go into this a little bit. You found out that your birth father was Albert Anastasio.
Anastasia, correct.
And he was a reputed mobster.
Correct.
Is that the correct word? Can I say that? Is that all right?
Oh yeah, no, that's correct. No, he was. He ran a little company called Murder Incorporated in New York, and he was partners with Charlie Luciano and Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello, and he became a very powerful man. The Gambino family was the Anastasia family. And when they assassinated Albert in 1957, it became the Gambino family because Carlo Gambino was his underboss.
But you were raised by your mom and your stepdad?
Yeah, my mother and I had a minder around me that my father put down around me. So, and I was in good hands. When did you realize that Albert Anastasia was your father? Right before he was assassinated. I was 14 years old. And I had met him for the first time, and then we were supposed to sit down and have a really super meeting, and unfortunately, before that happened, he was assassinated.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that.
One of the most profound assassinations in the history of the more organized crime. But you know, they made a very bad mistake, and they knew it. But when you look at The Godfather and you listen to Brando, when they went to Brando about the drug business, and he turned them down, and he said that if we touch it, our children will touch it, it'll be the downfall of the families. My father said that. And my father ran all the ports. And he said, you're not bringing that stuff in through my ports. That's all there is to it. He said, we didn't sign up for that business. And they just kept saying to him, but Albert, it's money, Albert. It's all about money. And he said, not in my book. So, you know, they did what they did, and then they were sorry they did it because he was the glue that held everything together. And everything went downhill after his assassination. And how did Meyer Lansky come into your life as well? I know he was part of your life story as well, right? Well, Meyer was my father's partner, and Meyer sort of looked after me after my father died. And, you know, he's the one that told me. He said, you know, a year later, 2 years later, he said, we made a terrible, terrible mistake. And he explained a lot of things to me. And so he sort of enlightened me on a lot of stuff. And my father had left me like 287 pages of written material depicting on what was going on and what was going to happen and where everything came from. So then I was close to Frank Costello, and I met Charlie Luciano in Italy, and all the pieces fell in place.
Now, for some people, they probably don't understand what that kind of life is like. Could you kind of offer a little bit of insight?
Well, it's changed so much, but there's there's a code that you live by, America, and if you choose to follow that lens of life, if you don't choose to do it, you should never go that far to take that oath. And I have a lot of friends of mine that have done 30 years in jail or better because they would never talk or rat on anybody. So they were made examples of and stuff like that, but they still stood up. And then there's other people that they'd sell their mother down the river to stay out of jail. So there's the problem with that way of life today is that there's not very many men of honor anymore, unfortunately.
And like you said, the way that the business is run is probably very different from when you knew it back in, I guess, probably in the 60s, right?
Oh, my heavens. It's like night and day, But there's, the fact is that a lot of us have went legitimate. So we know how to make a way through life, and we know how to put things together, and we still have different people we can reach out to make things happen. And, it's everything is a basic fundamental of how you want to live your life today. Our society, unfortunately, is going down a spiral, and the one thing that's missing drastically in our society is the word respect. People don't respect themselves. How can they respect someone else? Everybody's using these texts, and nobody talks to each other anymore. Everyone texts back and forth, and you don't see people face to face, so you really don't know who you're even talking to.
Now, all of this really ties into your book, Family Legacy.
Correct. I tell the truth about a lot of things that happened. In other words, in the beginning, you had the government, industry, organized crime, and unions were all partners. They worked cohesively together, actually. And you didn't have drive-by shootings, and you didn't have guns on every corner, and you didn't have. When I was a young boy in Philadelphia being raised, we never locked our front door. You could leave a baby pram outside. Children played in the streets from sun up to sundown. You never went home. You were always out in the street playing, doing something, and it was a whole different environment. Neighborhoods were looked after better, taken care of better. People trusted each other better. It was just a whole different deal. And and as we got older and older and older, things changed, and it's very sad what you see in the streets today. Some people are afraid to come out of their house. That's why they go to social media. They do everything off of the internet and everything, and it's just a whole different state of affairs.
It's funny, like progress really kind of makes us go backwards.
Well, only if you choose to. It's like, how many families do you know that really sit down and have dinner together every night?
Very true.
When I was raised up at 6 o'clock, you were at the dinner table, and you better have a good excuse if you weren't. So your parents and people looked you eyeball to eyeball. They knew whether kids were on drugs or anything of that nature. People discussed what was going on in the day. Today it's a hit and run deal all over the place.
How did you get into boxing?
I was playing football, and when you're in that era, when I was playing ball, if you were good enough to go into the pros, you couldn't go in until your class graduated from college because they didn't have any hardship cases in those days. So a lot of people that went a year to college or 2 years to college and then left, and teams would pick them up because they had a lot of talent. They would put you on almost like a farm baseball team, but it was football. They had semi-pro teams up and down the East Coast and all over the country, actually. And a lot of us played. I played for a team called Tinicum outside of Philadelphia, and you played there till you were eligible to play pro, but you were under agreement already with a professional team. So I was under agreement to the New York Jets, and when I was eligible to play, I had a lot of friends down in Philadelphia, and Philly had a great team. And then Joe Kuharich, Jerry Woolman bought the team, and he brought this coach, Joe Kuharich, in. And I watched the guy trade a championship football team away in a month and a half. Traded Sonny Jurgensen and Tommy McDonald to Washington for Norman Snead. I mean, just some ridiculous trades. And I said, wow, man, this is not good. And Muhammad Ali had just won the title. So I said to a couple friends of mine, I could beat that guy. And they put me in the gym, and the next thing I know, I was fighting professional.
You were known as Irish Jack Cowan from Boston.
Yeah, and I was from Philadelphia. And I got sent to Boston because the first couple fights I had, we were in Philly, and I got in a little bit of a jackpot in the streets, and they had to get me out of town, so they shipped me up to Boston. And I boxed out of Boston for it. Then at the end of my career, I was out of San Diego. I was California heavyweight champion.
Yes, and you're also in the California Boxing Hall of Fame as well, and Jersey too?
California Boxing Hall of Fame, the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame, Pennsylvania Boxing Hall of Fame, and a few of them.
Yeah, and you were undefeated in your first 16 professional fights.
16 professional fights, and then they found out that I had a disease called acromegalia, which is a tumor of the pituitary gland. And the doctor said, how can you shouldn't be fighting at all. What are you doing? How do you even get your mind? Because it causes great depression, they say, and stuff. And I said, yeah, really good. I need a day job. This is my day job. Thank you very much. So I really, I'm angry at my own self because I had a tremendous God-gifted talent that I abused. And I didn't, if I'd have put into boxing what I should have put into it, I probably would have had a good shot at being champion of the world.
Yeah, and you didn't have a too shabby record. You were 34-21-2 with 17 knockouts. Knockout victory.
Yeah, and a lot of decisions were hometown decisions for a lot of fighters that, I used to take fights on a week notice, 4 days notice. And, if I was doing business for the unions or something in a certain part of the country, and then someone offered me a fight, I took it to have an excuse to be there. So no one could tie me to anything, out of sight, out of mind. I was still a hooligan, you know what I mean?
And as a heavyweight, you also fought George Foreman and Ken Norton.
Oh, I fought them all. Yeah, Norton I beat badly, and they gave him a hometown decision. Actually, I could have sat on a stool in the ninth round. The end of the ninth round, it was such a great fight, and it was a great fight. People were standing on their chairs screaming so loud. When they rang the bell, nobody heard it. They rang it 3 times, and finally the referee separated us because we were in the middle of the ring slugging each other. They separated us, and I was going back to my corner, and Norton ran across the ring and hit me behind the head and drove me into the ring post. And Joey Almus, the commissioner, jumped up in the ring and said, if you can't continue, you just won the fight on the foul. And I should have just sat on the stool and stayed there because it was his hometown, and they were trying to get him to fight for the title, so there was no way that I was going to get a decision down. So, but, I got angry. I said, well, don't you worry, I'm going to take care of business. But I won the city, so I stayed there, and I knocked out a few guys in a row, and then I fought Henry Clark for the state title, and I beat Henry Clark, and no one else would fight me. So, it worked out pretty well. It's just the end of my career, and then at the end of my career, when I retired, they offered me, they had been offering me films all the way through my career, and I kept turning them down. And they came to me with Farewell, My Lovely with Robert Mitchum, and it was a starring role. And I said, you know what, maybe it's time. So they flew me out. I did a screen test, and Mitchum said it's either him or I don't do the movie. So I blame it all on Robert Mitchum.
What was Robert Mitchum like?
Oh, he was brilliant. He was such a dear friend. I mean, he became like a father. He was great. He was probably the most well-read man I ever met in my life. He was a very bright guy. He was a tremendous actor, and he was just a down-to-earth individual. And he walked me right through Farewell, My Love is a great movie. If you've never seen it, you should look it up. You would enjoy it. It was very well made. It had a great cast. We had 4 Oscar winners on the crew. Dean Televeris was done The Godfather for sets and designs. He won the Oscar. The cinematographer was John Alonzo, who won the Oscar for Chinatown. The makeup guys were Oscar winners. The special effects guy was an Oscar winner. And they all come to work because of Mitchum.
Robert Mitchum kind of comes across as a guy who is one of those people who were probably eternally cool.
Oh yeah, Mitchum was incredible. Robert was a story and a legend in itself. I mean, Robert was very close to Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes loved him a lot. You know, when he got busted back in the 40s for marijuana, he said it was a setup. He said, I walked into a party, I looked around, he said, I just put my hands out. I knew they were going to cuff me. They wanted him to rat on everybody in town that smoked pot. And they put him in jail, and Howard Hughes went down there to see him in jail. And Hughes was a Clinsley fanatic, you know. And Robert told me the story. He said, he's standing outside of my cell, Jack, and he's looking in and he's saying, Robert, you do not have to be in this filthy, disgusting place with all these filthy, disgusting people. Mitchum said, well, Howard, I'm in this wonderful establishment with all these kind-hearted, wonderful people. And he did 6 months. He wouldn't rat on anybody. And then when he came out, Howard Hughes gave him a huge check, and his career never suffered, you know.
Now, after that, you were actually off as a Bond villain, as Jaws in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, I turned it down. I did Farewell, My Lovely, and then I did King Kong with Jessica Lange, and King Kong was a big movie. And they loved, Cubby Broccoli loved what I did in Farewell, My Lovely, and they wanted me to play this character in Jaws, and I really wasn't crazy about the script, and I was trying to get my career more like Victor McLaglen, and I was doing a picture called March or Die with Gene Hackman and Catherine Deneuve and Max von Sydow, and I probably could have got out of it, and I could have went over and done the Bond movie, but you know, I told him, I said, well, let's see if my agent can get me out of this other movie, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't press the issue. And you know, probably a good thing I didn't, because I got done the March or Die movie, and then 2 weeks later I was doing Superman. You did Superman 1 and 2, and you played Non, as everybody remembers, the big guy out of the trio of the Krypton villains. When you met, you got to meet Marlon Brando, I guess, right? Well, Brando and I became very good friends. He knew my father pretty well, and he couldn't wait to meet me, actually. Brando I was going to ask, because, you know, knowing what you knew about organized crime, and here you were dealing with, you know, working with the man who played the Godfather, you probably had some great conversations. Yeah, we did. And he, like I said, he knew my father well. And I loved Marlon. Marlon was a good guy. He was a tremendous actor. And he was, I just liked him. He was a really good person. I enjoyed working with him, and you know, it's magic when you work with people. You learn so much from people like that. You know, it just helps you in everything you do in your career. So it was good. Very fortunate. I worked with a lot of very good actors in my career. And ironically, you ended up in a movie called Mob Boss later on in your career. I did that as a favor to somebody. Yeah, it was a low budget little movie that this guy was putting together. And he asked me if I would do a role in it, and I said sure, because it helped him get the money for it. It was good. And it was a nice little film. We had a lot of fun doing it. When you did Superman, you didn't get along too well with Christopher Reeve? That story is so taken out of context, I'll tell you. Okay. You know, when you work with anybody for 3 years, and you work closely with them, you know, there's always some kind of an argument somewhere. And it really wasn't that much of an argument. It was the fact of London had very few good Italian restaurants, and there's one called the San Lorenzo in Beecham Place, which is like a paparazzi joint. Princess Di used to go to, but the owners of it were dear friends of mine. So I would spoon it up to everybody to, you know, all the people who lived in London. We should eat dinner down there and stuff, and drummed up a lot of business for them, you know. And I used to eat my dinner there every night because I lived in Cadogan Square right down the street. I just walk up to the restaurant and sit down and eat. And they cook for me the way I know, and you know, the Italian food that I like to eat. Christopher Reeve was in there one night with a whole bunch of people from the film, and he's talking about me and my father and New York and the mafia and everything, and he's talking a bunch of garbage. And the guy that owned the restaurant called me on the phone and said, Jack, he said, how well do you know this Christopher Reeve kid? And I said, well, why? And he told me, and I said, whoa, So Christopher, unfortunately, was like a young kid. Superman was the first big movie he ever did, and he did it well. I mean, Richard Donner got a performance out of him. You'll never see another Superman that will do that role as well as Christopher did. So the next day I went to the studio and I grabbed him up and we went into a little room. We had a chat and they made it very clear that you don't talk about my family and you don't talk about me. And he understood. And so we get outside the hallway in front of all the people and all of a sudden he becomes Superman. He said, "You can't talk to me that way." And I said, What do you want? And I threw him against the wall and I was just ready to hit him. And Dick Donner jumped up in my ear and said, "Jack, not in the face. Don't hit him in the face." I busted out laughing and dropped him on the floor, and I just let it go. And it was the end. And that was the whole skirmish. And everybody's so taken out of proportion. But it was done. It was over with. And Chris was a good kid. He just was a kid, though. Some people don't know how to walk out of a character when you walk off the set.
Sure.
They carry it around with them all the time. Thank God he did. He did a great job in the film. It was a great Superman. In fact, when they dismissed Donner, had Christopher stood up and said, "No Donner, no me," they would have never got rid of Donner. They couldn't have. And I was a little bit irked at him for that because Hackman never came back. I almost didn't go back. It was the stupidest thing they ever did was firing Donner.
You said that there could have been a little bit more to your character as well, right?
Well, they just, Lester and Donner are like night and day, director-wise. So if you see the Donner cut, it's a much better film. I don't know if you've ever watched the Donner of Superman 2, because we had shot like 85% of the movie. But they had to go back and reshoot a lot of stuff because for a new director to put his name on the picture as a director, he has to have shot better than 50% of it. But then how do you cut Marlon Brando out of a picture? They had already paid him. They already shot the footage. The reason they cut him out is because they didn't want to pay him the points, which was the dumbest thing. I mean, and in the Donner cut, he's all there. He's all through it. Came out. It's kind of if you haven't seen the Donner cut, you should look at it. Donner would have done Superman 3, 4, 5, and 6. It would have been a whole different franchise.
I think sometimes you just get that chemistry between actors and directors, and you get magic on the screen.
Well, Richard Donner lived the Superman thing. In fact, he did the comic books. He still does them, I think. Him and Mankiewicz, they just love the subject, so they put a lot of time and energy into doing it correctly. And Superman 1's a great movie, and the Donner cut of 2 is a great film, and even the Lester cut works because it was a great cast. It was there was a lot of footage that was shot, and the premise was there, but Lester had to add a little comedy to it, which I thought was kind of dumb. But
while we're talking about your movie career and boxing, now we can kind of almost make a little segue. Now, you said that there's actually a tie-in between you and the Rocky movie.
Well, that was my life. I mean, when we did Farewell, My Lovely, Stallone did a small role in the movie. And he was writing the script, and he picked my brain every single day. He had never been to Philadelphia. And I was the gangster fighter. I was involved with organized crime from day one of my life, and I explained the waterfront to him. And the part where he breaks the eggs in the morning and drinks that I do that every day. He got that from me. I still do it.
Were you ever credited?
No, I never pushed the button either. I mean, Chuck Wepner sued him and got money. Chuck was the bleeder, but Chuck was from Bayonne, New Jersey. Chuck never was down in Philadelphia. But I explained all Philadelphia to him, all the lineages of fighters and the gym that he would up those steps. That was the gym we trained at, Pat's Young Gym. And it was on the corner like that, and everybody was singing on the corners, harmonizing and stuff. And that was there was a lot of musical talent that came out of Philadelphia in that era. You had Bobby Rydell, you had Paul Anka. Just one group on top of another. So there was a lot of talent that came out of the city, and everybody used to be harmonizing on corners, thinking they were going to get a record deal.
Did you ever do the training where you were actually punching the beef
I did a similar thing to that, and I told him about it, and he elaborated on it.
Wow. See, this is something that a lot of people really don't know, where some of this inspiration comes from.
Well, and I was signed to fight Ali 4 times, so I explained all that to him, and he took it a step further to where he fought for the title and jazz like, and I told him how close it came, up, and he used a lot of it. And, God bless him. The Rocky movie was a good movie. It just it showed how some people can come from nothing to something, and then how they can lose it if they don't keep their eyeballs on it. He's still making movies pertaining to Rocky.
Now, unfortunately, when you were boxing, you never actually got to fight Muhammad Ali because I guess one of the contenders had knocked you out, but then you had a rematch with that contender, Jimmy Somerville, and then you knocked him out. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I was supposed to fight Ali before that. When Norton fought Ali, he was supposed to fight me. We had a contract and everything. Norton's people were very wealthy, and $3 million went up to Chicago to Herbert Muhammad, and Muhammad Ali called me on the phone, begging, he apologized. He said, I don't know how to say this to you, but he said, I'll find a place, we'll fight somewhere. And he fought Norton instead. And he and I were great friends. I mean, Ali and I he was one of the good guys in life. He would have been a great athlete in anything he did, any sport.
All right, so nowadays you were actually working on building a studio.
Yeah, we're in Nevada, and we're going to build the biggest studio in the history of the business, and the business needs it. It warrants it, and it's going to work out very well. That's what I'm doing over here. We're over here putting pieces together now.
When do you think the studio will be ready?
In a couple of years, and we're doing something. We're building it with industrial hemp, which is going to revolutionize construction because it's a great material to work with, and it's stronger and better than concrete and better than steel, and it's going to be good, boy. We're really looking forward to it, and we can build it much faster.
Let me ask you this. I mean, given all that's happened in your life, I mean, you've got a very colorful life, to say the least. You've got the book out already, which, documents a good portion of it. Would you ever want to see a movie made about your life going from, being a fighter through an actor? And
they keep saying they want me to write a book that ties everything in. I said, it's coming because I wrote the first book, the second, third, and I think there's 3 more books I think we'll put out, and and we're going to tell. And then I had a meeting today with Charlie Luciano's son, Anthony Scotti, and he's got a bunch of material in his father's book, and so we're going to not only do movies, but we're going to do a television series, and we're going to go back to the beginning and bring it forward and show how the country actually opened up and evolved, and tell things about things that no one ever talks about, and tell the truth about a lot of things. It's going to stagger people. My book goes from my father's death to Kennedy's death, and I tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination, which a lot of people have written so many fallacies about, and led everybody down so many paths that, it's just, the truth should be told. Jack Kennedy was shot 3 times, wasn't shot just once. Oswald never pulled the trigger on anything, wasn't even in the building. He was a patsy. They used him. I mean, there were 13 shots fired at Dealey Plaza that day.
What's lost to history, I guess, has to be dug up sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there's they just did the picture of the Irishman. Scorsese took advantage of some things. There's some answers that people have been looking for a long time, like who shot Jimmy Hoffa, who shot Joe Gallo, and Frank Sheeran. I knew Frank Sheeran very well. And there's Bobby De Niro. He's like 5'9", and he's playing a guy my size. I mean, Frank Sheeran was from Philadelphia. He was 6'4", but he never killed Hoffa, and he never killed Joe Gallo. But he did drive Hoffa around, and he did work for Russell Bufalino and other people, and he had a nasty temper, and he did a few things in his life. And I knew Russell Bufalino well. He was from Western Pennsylvania. He was actually from Buffalo and went to Western Pennsylvania, but he was one of the most connected dons in Washington than anybody. He was a clever guy. I liked Russell, actually.
Did you know Jimmy Hoffa?
Oh, I knew him very well. And and I can tell you uncategorically that Frank Sheeran never killed Jimmy Hoffa.
Okay.
And they never will find Jimmy Hoffa's body. He's not buried anywhere.
I can only imagine. Okay. His name is Jack O'Halloran. Jack, I'd like to thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it. And these are incredible stories, and good luck with the continuing books and the studio facilities that you're working on. So you're a busy guy for the next couple of years, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's for sure. But it's fun, If you enjoy doing things, it's not work. It's, you just enjoy doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Anytime, my friend.
Special thanks to Jack O'Halloran for coming down to the Sherpa Screening Room and sharing his story. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode as well as the rest of Hollywood Week. Yep, we've been doing shows all week if you're listening in real time, Monday through Friday. Check out the show tomorrow and see what else we've got in the Sherpa Screening Room. You can listen to this show and all of its episodes at my website, Sherpalution.com, and follow me on social media at Sherpalution at Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Mr. Bruce, please show everybody how much more powerful than a locomotive you are and escort everyone to the door. Thank you very much. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?